Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into employee retention, using the insights from Melvyn Valenzuela's book, The Retention Edge. We'll unpack the key takeaways, especially for those of you navigating today's crazy job market.
What I find really interesting about this book is how Valenzuela goes beyond the usual HR stuff. He makes a really strong argument for why keeping employees isn't just like a nice thing to do, but a real advantage in today's business world, which is, changing so fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right from the start, he throws us into this whirlwind of remote work, the gig economy, and, let's not forget, the Great Resignation. It's like the old rules just don't apply anymore.
Exactly. And this creates both challenges and opportunities, right? Attracting and keeping talent is tougher than ever. But the companies who figure this out, they'll have a serious edge. I mean, think about it. Remote work means you're not just competing for talent in your city anymore, you're competing globally.
So, okay, the playing field is changing. But why should companies care so much about retention in the first place?
Valenzuela makes a super convincing case for the cost of employee turnover. And he doesn't just talk about the obvious stuff like the money you spend on advertising and onboarding.
Right, he digs into those less obvious costs, too. The things that are harder to put a number on but can really hurt a company.
He calls them the intangible impacts. Like, he talks about how losing a top salesperson can damage your relationships with clients, maybe even lead to lost business, or how losing a senior engineer, well, that could mean losing crucial knowledge and slowing down future projects.
It's like a ripple effect, right? One person leaves, and it can impact the whole team, even the company's reputation.
Exactly. Valenzuela really hammers home the point that keeping employees is an investment that pays off. He says there's an actual ROI of retention.
And he breaks down the benefits, right? Increased productivity, more innovation, happier customers. It's like a positive chain reaction.
Precisely. When you have experienced employees who are engaged and happy, they get more done, they come up with creative solutions, and they provide better customer service. That all leads to, well, a stronger bottom line and a more competitive company.
So it's not just about avoiding costs. It's about actively building a successful environment.
Right. And that brings us to Valenzuela's framework for what he calls the retention edge. It comes down to 6 key drivers of employee engagement. These are the pillars of any good retention strategy.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are they?
Well, he emphasizes providing meaningful work, offering recognition and rewards, creating growth opportunities, encouraging work-life balance, nurturing a positive company culture, and fostering strong leadership. It's like, think of it as the Mr. Grow model.
Mr. Growell, I love it. Much easier to remember than just a list. Okay, so obviously competitive salaries are important, but Valenzuela seems to be saying it's not just about the money.
Absolutely. He breaks down those costs of hiring and onboarding, and it's eye-opening. Here's an example. He estimates that replacing a mid-level manager can cost more than twice their annual salary. When you add in recruiting fees, lost productivity, training, and all those intangible things we talked about, it adds up fast.
Wow. That's way more than I would guessed. So if just throwing money at the problem isn't the answer, where should companies focus their energy?
Valenzuela really pushes for creating a work environment where employees feel valued and engaged. He talks about the importance of the physical workplace, too.
Interesting. So we're not just talking about, like, beanbag chairs and free snacks,
Right.
right?
It's about things like natural light, ergonomic workstations, and spaces that encourage people to work together.
Creating a space that people actually want to be in.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just how it looks. It's about employee well-being. Valenzuela says that a positive environment can reduce stress and boost morale. He even points to research that shows a link between the work environment and employee health and happiness.
So it's about more than just making the office pretty. It's about creating a space that supports people.
Yeah, exactly. And, he doesn't stop there. Valenzuela highlights another crucial piece of the retention puzzle.
I bet I know it's coming. Communication. It always comes back to communication.
You got it. Open and honest communication is like essential for a positive and productive work environment.
And I think we've all seen what happens when communication breaks down. Things can go downhill really quickly.
Exactly. Valenzuela even shares a story in the book about a company where bad communication led to a ton of people quitting. They were losing their best people, all because of a lack of transparency and feedback. It's a cautionary tale. It shows just how damaging poor communication can be.
Okay, so communication's key. Got it. What else?
Valenzuela really stresses investing in employee development. He says that opportunities for growth are crucial to keep people engaged, especially now when everyone is always looking for new challenges.
It makes sense. No one wants to feel stuck. And I think that ties back to the Great Resignation, right? People were leaving jobs where they felt stagnant, like there was no room to grow.
Exactly. Valenzuela sees it as a two-way street. Employees are more likely to stick around if a company invests in their development, and companies benefit from having a more skilled and engaged workforce.
And of course, we can't forget about work-life balance. It's become such a buzzword. But Valenzuela seems to be saying it's more than just a trend, it's a necessity.
Absolutely. He talks about the rise of flexible work arrangements, things like remote work and flexible schedules, and how they impact employee satisfaction. He even asks a really interesting question. Can flexible work actually make people more productive?
Now that's an interesting thought. It does seem like the traditional 9 to 5 is becoming outdated.
Right. Valenzuela is pushing us to rethink the old ways of working and find solutions that work for both employees and the company.
This is all great stuff. We're just scratching the surface of Valenzuela's ideas, though.
Yeah.
I'm ready to dive into some of the specific tools and techniques he recommends. Like, what can companies actually do to put these principles into practice?
Well, Valenzuela gives us a whole toolkit of practical strategies, but we'll have to save those for the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we're back, ready to explore those actionable tools Valenzuela recommends for improving employee retention. Where should companies even begin?
Well, he covers quite a few, but one that really stood out to me was using employee engagement surveys. They can be really valuable for getting direct insights from your employees.
That makes sense. But I imagine there's a certain skill to creating a survey that actually provides useful information. How does Valenzuela suggest companies go about this?
He emphasizes going beyond those generic questions, really tailoring the survey to your specific company culture and your goals. And it's not just about, collecting the data, it's about actually doing something with it. Valenzuela warns against what he calls survey fatigue, which can happen if employees see no changes after giving their feedback.
So it's about taking those results, analyzing them for trends and problem areas. And then most importantly, making actual changes to address the issues.
Exactly. Valenzuela gives some great advice on how to effectively look at the data and share the findings back with employees in a clear way. He even suggests creating action plans based on the feedback and involving employees in the process so they feel like their voices are being heard.
That's a good point. It's a great way to build trust and show that you're serious about using that feedback.
Right. Another tool he talks about is exit interviews, which, they can be a little awkward, right? Like you're trying to, get information from someone who's already decided to leave.
Yeah, it's like, wait, why didn't you tell us this before?
Right. But Valenzuela argues that exit interviews can be a goldmine of information. They can give you really valuable insights into why people are leaving, whether it's because of salary, management style, or even something like a toxic team dynamic.
It's almost like a postmortem, but for their experience at the company. You can use that information to prevent those same issues from happening again.
Exactly. And sometimes it might be something really easy for the company to fix, like, offering more professional development opportunities or improving communication between managers and their teams.
Okay, so we've got engagement surveys to get feedback from current employees and exit interviews to learn from those who are leaving. What about ongoing performance management? Does Valenzuela have any new ideas about that?
He actually kind of throws out the old, dreaded annual performance review. He's more in favor of a dynamic and ongoing approach. He calls it performance management as a two-way street.
Interesting. So it's not just the boss giving feedback. It's about creating a dialogue.
Exactly. Valenzuela suggests having regular check-ins between managers and employees, where they can talk about progress, challenges, goals. And it's not just about the manager giving feedback. Employees should feel comfortable giving feedback to their managers as well.
I like that. It changes the focus from criticism to growth and development. Less about judgment, more about collaboration.
He provides a framework for these conversations, really emphasizing things like setting clear expectations, providing regular recognition, and creating a culture of open communication.
So it's about creating a continuous loop of feedback and improvement rather than just that once-a-year event that everyone dreads.
There's a concept that I find really interesting. It's called Kaizen.
Oh, I've heard of Kaizen, but I'll admit I'm not totally clear on what it is. How does it relate to employee retention?
So Kaizen is it's a Japanese term that basically means continuous improvement. It's a philosophy focused on making, small, gradual changes over time instead of trying to change everything all at once. Valenzuela suggests applying this to employee retention.
Oh, I see. So instead of waiting for a big crisis or a mass exodus of employees, you're constantly looking for small ways to make the work environment better and boost morale.
Exactly. And Valenzuela provides some really great examples. One that sticks out is a case study about a manufacturing company that had really high turnover rates. They started using Kaizen principles by simply asking their employees for ideas on how to improve their work environment.
Sometimes we overlook the most obvious solutions. Just ask the people who are actually doing the work.
I know, right? And they found that some of the best changes were super simple things, like changing the lighting on the factory floor or getting more comfortable chairs for the workers on the assembly line.
Small changes, but big impact.
Exactly. And by consistently making these little improvements, they create a much better work environment and significantly reduce turnover.
I love that example. It shows that you don't need a huge budget or a fancy program to make a real difference. Sometimes it's the small, thoughtful things that matter most.
That's the beauty of Kaizen, right? It's
Right.
not about grand gestures. It's about shifting your mindset. It's a commitment to constantly improving.
Okay, so we've got surveys, exit interviews, ongoing performance conversations, and this Kaizen approach. I'm starting to see how it all fits together into a more complete approach to retention. But does Valenzuela give any examples of companies that are actually doing this well?
He does. He has a whole section on case studies and best practices, looking at companies like Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce. Companies that are known for keeping their employees happy.
Oh, I'd love to learn from them. What are they doing that works so well?
Well, each company has its own way of doing things, but there are definitely some common threads. For example, they all put a big emphasis on employee well-being. They offer great benefits, and they create work environments that are supportive and inclusive.
That's not surprising. But are there any takeaways that would apply to a smaller company, one that maybe doesn't have Google's resources?
Oh, for sure. Valenzuela says it's not about copying what these companies do exactly. It's about understanding the ideas behind them and adapting them to your own company culture and resources.
So, like, Google has all those famous perks, right? Free gourmet meals, gyms, even nap pods. But the takeaway isn't that every company needs to offer the exact same things.
Right. The takeaway is that Google understands how important it is to create a workplace where people feel valued and taken care of. They invest in their employees' well-being, which in turn makes people more loyal and engaged.
That's a good point. It's about finding creative ways to show your employees that you care, even if you can't, offer the same level of perks as a tech giant.
Exactly. Valenzuela gives us a framework and a set of principles that can work in any company, big or small, no matter what industry.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm already thinking about how I can apply some of these ideas to my own work, but I feel like there's still more to uncover.
Hmm.
What else does Valenzuela talk about?
Well, he doesn't just give us tools for today. He actually takes a look at what the future of work might look like and how those emerging trends will continue to change the employee experience.
Oh, interesting. What kind of trends are we talking about?
Things like the rise of automation, the growing importance of skills development, and the increasingly global nature of work. It's a whole new world out there. And the companies that can adapt are the ones that will succeed.
Wow, and sounds like we've got a lot to unpack. Let's dive into the future of work in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, ready to explore this future of work thing. It's a little intimidating, I have to admit.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of big changes. And Valenzuela doesn't sugarcoat it. He says those companies that can, see these trends coming and adapt, they're going to have a real leg up when it comes to attracting and keeping great employees.
So let's get specific.
Mm.
What are some of the biggest trends he points to?
Well, he spends a lot of time on this whole automation thing. We're already seeing it in so many industries. Tasks that used to be done by people are now done by machines.
Yeah, I think that's what freaks people out, right? The whole robots are taking our jobs scenario.
I get that fear, but Valenzuela's point is that automation isn't necessarily about, getting rid of human workers entirely. It's more about how the nature of work itself is changing.
Okay, so instead of focusing on the tasks that can be automated, we should be developing those skills that are uniquely human. Creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, that kind of thing.
Exactly. He argues that companies need to help their employees adapt to this new landscape by giving them opportunities to, upskill and reskill.
So it's not just about hiring people with the right skills for today. It's about investing in their development so they're ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
He actually gives some practical advice on how to do that. Things like creating in-house training programs,
Hmm.
offering tuition reimbursement, or even partnering with those online learning platforms so employees can access a wider range of courses.
It's almost like you're future-proofing your workforce against all these changes.
Right. Another trend he talks about is how work is becoming more global. Thanks to technology, we don't have to just hire people who live nearby anymore.
Yeah, remote work has definitely changed the game. Companies can now find talent from all over the world.
It's amazing. But it also creates challenges for retention. Like, how do you create a strong company culture when your team is spread across who knows how many time zones?
Yeah, good point. It seems like communication and connection become even more important in that kind of setup.
For sure. Valenzuela suggests, really focusing on building that culture of trust and transparency. Maybe that means using technology to help people communicate better, offering flexible work arrangements to fit those different time zones, or even finding ways to do virtual team building stuff.
It's about finding those ways to build community, even when people aren't physically together.
Great. He also talks about things like culturally sensitive training and support, making sure that everyone, no matter where they are or what their background is, feels included and respected.
It sounds like retention in this future of work is going to take a lot of flexibility and adaptability from both companies and employees.
Valenzuela believes that adaptability itself is going to be one of the most valuable skills, as we move forward. Employees who are comfortable with change, who are willing to learn new things, and who can handle uncertainty, those are the people who will be in high demand.
So it's not just about what you know now, but how well you can learn and adapt.
He encourages companies to really foster that culture of continuous learning, where it's okay to experiment and innovate. Maybe that means giving employees chances to take on new challenges or try out different roles within the company.
Creating an environment where people feel like they can grow and evolve as the workplace changes.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes leading with empathy. Leaders need to understand that, all these changes create uncertainty and anxiety for employees.
It's about creating that sense of safety where people feel supported and like it's okay to take risks.
Valenzuela truly believes that the companies that prioritize people, the ones that focus on creating a work environment where people feel valued, connected, and empowered, they're the ones that are going to succeed.
This has been a fantastic discussion, really eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better grasp of not just employee retention, but the future of work in general. It's clear that this isn't just an HR thing. It's something every company needs to be thinking about.
And that's really Valenzuela's core message. He's saying that investing in your employees is the smartest investment you can make. It's not just about saving money, it's about building a real advantage for your company.
So to wrap things up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that employee retention is so much more than just, perks and benefits. It's about creating a culture where people feel valued, where they're challenged, and where they feel inspired. It's about building that kind of environment where people actually want to stay and do their best work.
Yeah, it's a great point. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the retention edge. Thanks for listening, everyone.